Hello, my name is Herb Simmens, and I'm here from the Climate Emergency Forum. We have a very special program for you today, and it's called Beyond Emission Reductions. Much of COP is focused, of course, and has been for many years and decades, on emission reductions, but there are very promising approaches and techniques that go beyond emission reductions that can help us meet our climate goals, and that's what we're talking about today with really a first-class, world-class panel of guests. First, I'd like to acknowledge the International Society for Ecological Economics. We're delighted to be a part of your team here at COP. And among our panelists today, first we have Dr. Shaun Fitzgerald. Shaun is the Executive Director of the Center for Climate Repair at Cambridge University. He's a fellow of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and he works at the interface of academic research, business, government policy, and public engagement. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, Shaun, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks ever so much indeed, Herb. So, as Director of the Centre for Climate Repair, I'm going to share a few thoughts with you about actually going beyond emissions reduction. First of all, just want to acknowledge the huge number of people that we are working with around the world. There are lots of people in Cambridge, but actually lots and lots of collaborators. And because we're a research organisation, our first and foremost objective is to further knowledge in the areas of climate repair. To be absolutely clear that we are not looking at deployment, we want to make increased knowledge as an opportunity to have more informed decisions about the actions that we need to take. I think we'll all know that we're not in a happy place, so we're hearing today and the last few days about keeping 1.5 alive. It does depend on your definition of what we mean by 1.5. This is a news clip from just in February earlier this year, that the world's first a whole year-long breach of key 1.5 was exceeded. That does not mean to say that 1.5 is dead. Be clear about the actual definitions that we're using. It is unfortunately clearly obvious that the emissions of modelled pathways in the IPCC show that current policies of the various countries will not achieve global net zero by 2050. We therefore need to work a lot harder. There's a clear recognition that greenhouse gas removal at scale is needed and forms part of that net zero target. Getting to net zero is necessary but not sufficient. We need net negative because we will need to drain the atmosphere of excess greenhouse gases that we've already emitted and those which we are going to continue emitting. We also need to seriously factor in adaptation, which is a clear topic of this COP. And then I've got concerns that solar radiation management could be used in desperation without more understanding. And we need to have that understanding if we're going to make proper decisions about it. So climate repair has three pillars. The first is emissions reduction. The second is greenhouse gas removal. And the third is something that we call refreeze, just to make it elegant in terms of 3 Rs. But be really clear, that third R in particular is the area of research. There are some actions right now regarding deployment of removal of greenhouse gases as well as ongoing research. And we are using this research to try and explore whether this diagram, which was proposed by Shepard back in 2014, whether the napkin diagram is indeed feasible. So there's a business as usual curve. Cutting emissions actually then levels us out, but we need to do more than that. We need to do carbon dioxide removal to get to a net negative position to drain that. And then concerned about, well, depending on how long it takes, can we keep a lid on temperatures and therefore some form of solar radiation management in the intervening period? We don't know, and that's what the research is about. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Shaun. I'm Jill Storey. I'm the Marine Carbon Dioxide Removal Advisor with the World Ocean Council, and we're delighted to be here today to talk about this important topic. We think it's one of the most important topics of this COP. And I'd just like to start by putting it into context. We all know the state we're in. We all know that the IPCC have said that we need to remove 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide by 2050. There's been a lot of talk about decarbonising first and then looking at removals. I think most people realise today we're at that point where we need to do everything all at once. So we need to be looking at removals today and looking at it quickly. Putting into context, 10 gigatons is a quarter of the current annual emissions. It's more than the combined emissions of the US and India. And if we look at the durable carbon removals for 2023, the amount of durable carbon removal sold was 4.5 million tons. So to get to 10 gigaton scale per annum by 2050, you can see the speed of the change that's required. It needs to be the fastest growing industry in history. So far, 90% of the removals have been, the durable removals have been land-based. We know the ocean is 71% of the surface area. We know that the ocean stores 50 times more carbon dioxide than the atmosphere. So it's the obvious place to look. So we're looking at the cycles, the natural cycles in the ocean, to see what can be slightly adjusted to give the impact that we need. If anybody's new to this field, this was a fantastic report to look at. The US National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine report in 2022 goes into a lot of detail about some of the possible pathways. And also I put a link to Ocean Vision's website too. Leah's going to talk from Ocean Visions. They've got some fantastic materials as well. So this is on the supply side, but really to get to scale, obviously we need to create an industry. We need the supply and demand. We've been told by McKinsey that this marketplace, the removal marketplace, could be a $1.2 trillion industry. So we need to get everybody engaged. So some people will be engaged in this space because they're really focused on doing the right thing for the climate. Some people might see the potential opportunity, but we need everything. We need everybody as part of the solution engaging in this sector. So far, after COP26, where companies started to have net zero targets, that created the demand. So we're starting to see now some small pilots around the world. This is a part of Morocco. This is an example of New Zealand. This is off the US. And the way these pilots are being funded is due to some of the large corporates who've recognized that to meet their net zero commitments, they're going to also need removals as part of that, of their strategy. So companies like Microsoft are doing a great service for this sector in terms of helping finance these early stage pilots by buying removals in advance. So as you can see, there's a lot that needs to happen in this area, on the supply and the demand side, to scale to the scale that we require. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? $1.2 trillion. There's nothing when you talk about climate that's small, except, of course, if you're talking about phytoplankton or other organisms. We go from the smallest scale to the largest, and we all have to try to become adept at all these scales, which is quite a challenge, but it's both daunting and exciting. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Leonardo Valenzuela Perez. You are the Director of International Partnerships, and you lead the Global Ecosystem for Ocean Solutions, GEOS, at Ocean Visions. GEOS is a UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development endorsed program. And you've had a remarkable array of experience in all sorts of sectors, and we're eager to hear your comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Herb. Thanks, everyone, for coming to this press conference. I'm Leonardo Valenzuela, and I'm here representing Ocean Visions to talk to you about Arctic sea ice. So I'll just go straight into the topic. So Arctic sea ice is a critical component of the Earth climate system, and that acts as a reflector of solar radiation, is under a huge threat. The Arctic is warming 3 to 4 times faster than the global average, leading to significant summer sea ice loss. So this accelerated melting reduces the Earth's albedo effect, causing more heat to be absorbed by the ocean and exacerbates global warming. So projections indicate that the current rate, and this is highly relevant, we could face sea ice-free summers before 2050. We know that the only permanent way to stop the loss of Arctic sea ice and ultimately allow it to rebuild is to reduce global temperatures. This means drastically cutting emissions of greenhouse gases and also cleaning up and removing the legacy greenhouse gas pollution built up in our atmosphere and oceans. Unfortunately, the best available science indicates that almost all scenarios of rapid decarbonization combined with large-scale carbon dioxide removal are still unlikely to cool the planet in time to prevent further loss of Arctic sea ice. Given the enormity of the risk associated with continued loss of sea ice, Ocean Visions believes it is necessary to responsibly investigate all possible ideas that may be able to help us forestall dangerous losses. So Ocean Visions is dedicated to develop science-based, scalable solutions to address the climate crisis with a focus on marine ecosystems. In response to the alarming decline of Arctic sea ice, we have developed the Arctic Sea Ice Roadmap, a comprehensive assessment of potential pathways to slow or reverse, potentially, this loss. We are hoping to align this initiative with the UN's proclamation of the Decade of Action for Cryospheric Science that starts next year. And our emphasis is on the need for immediate and collaborative efforts. So the Arctic Sea Ice Roadmap is comprised of is the assessment of 21 different strategies across five main categories. Arctic protection, pollution management, ice management, surface albedo modification, and solar radiation modification. What we have done is a prioritization and research, so identifying approaches that have the highest potential impact and highlight the need for increased research to fill knowledge gaps regarding their feasibility, risk, and benefits. We are also emphasizing the need for collaborative efforts. The roadmap underscores the importance of international collaboration among scientists, policymakers, indigenous communities, and other relevant stakeholders to develop and implement safe and effective interventions. Preserving Arctic sea ice is crucial, not only for regional ecosystems and indigenous communities, but also for global climate stability. The loss of sea ice accelerates global warming, leading to more extreme weather patterns and sea level rise that affects populations worldwide. A better understanding of the pathways outlined in the roadmap may help mitigate these effects, contributing to the stabilization of the climate system. The Arctic crisis is a global emergency that requires immediate and coordinated action. Ocean Visions invites partners from all sectors to join us in advancing research pathways for innovative solutions to protect and restore Arctic sea ice. We should explore all options to understand their realistic potential and hopefully prevent the crossing of critical climate thresholds. The rapid decline of Arctic sea ice is a clear indicator of the urgency of the climate crisis. Ocean Visions is committed to leading efforts to develop and implement effective strategies to address this challenge, and we call upon the climate community and beyond to collaborate with us in this vital endeavor to protect this critical marine ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perez. Can anyone think of a challenge more important and more daunting than stopping the collapse of the Arctic sea ice and restoring it? I think that's what we're all focused on, and the kinds of efforts that Ocean Visions and other groups are making is really, it's so important, and it requires our complete support. And so I hope those of us who are watching and listening today will do all they can to support this amazing effort, an essential effort. I'd now like to introduce Paul Beckwith. Paul Beckwith is a veteran of the Climate Emergency Forum. He's a climate system scientist. He's taught at the University of Ottawa and as well as Carleton University. And he's an extremely well-known climate educator with over 1,200 videos. Paul, I don't know how you find the time and energy to do it on YouTube. Paul, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. So, beyond emissions reductions, right? I mean, we've been talking about trying to reduce emissions for a long period of time through many climate conferences, et cetera, but we need to do more than that. We need to go beyond this. So what are we talking about? Well, for years I've been talking about an analogy of a three-legged bar stool, and one leg of the bar stool is that we need to slash fossil fuel emissions. That includes not just CO2, but methane. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, as we know, so if we reduce methane levels, we can see immediate effects on reduction of global temperatures, whereas reducing CO2 is much more difficult and has longer-term effects. So that's the first leg of the bar stool, is slashing fossil fuel emissions, but that doesn't remove it from the atmosphere. That would stabilize levels as long as we still have our carbon sinks doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're weakening. So, you know, we could slash fossil fuel emissions and still see a rise in greenhouse gases because of losing our carbon sinks. I'll talk a little bit about some of the methods for that, but Shaun and Jill, and you know, that's what they're talking about. Also, the third leg of the bar stool is solar radiation management. We need to cool the planet. Now, it's not a matter of cooling the planet uniformly because the planet hasn't heated uniformly, right? Losing Arctic sea ice, losing the reflective albedo, if you like, of the Arctic means that there's more solar absorption of radiation in the Arctic. So the Arctic's warming much, much faster than the rest of the planet. In fact, if you go to the high Arctic, it's 4 to 5 times faster. And the problem is that the jet streams exist because we have a cold Arctic and a warm equator. So as we're warming the Arctic by much, much faster rates than the rest of the planet, the jet streams slow down and become wavier and get stuck in place, and therefore we get all the extreme weather events ramping up, which we see around the world. Just look at the flooding in Spain, look at the wildfires in Canada last summer, the tropical storms that develop into hurricanes or typhoons or cyclones around the world. They have more energy because for every degree Celsius warming in the temperature, we get 7% more water vapor in the air, and that feeds the energy into these storms. So we need all of these sort of things of this three-legged bar stool, and we are in a climate emergency, but we're not acting as if we're in a climate emergency. And the danger is that we cross these thresholds and we start getting tipping points, which means that some of the carbon sinks that have been working for us for human existence, like carbon capture in the ocean, like carbon capture in the soils, et cetera, some of those sinks are actually reducing in strength and failing because of the warming that's already occurred. So we don't really have much choice. We are in an emergency, but governments are not responding as if it's a climate emergency. But, you know, my first COP was Lima, Peru in 2014, and you couldn't really talk about solar radiation management. You couldn't talk about carbon dioxide. It was a barred topic. Nobody wanted to talk about it, but I did. And you know, it's going to be vital for us to do these things, whether we like it or not. So we better try to figure out how the Earth is going to respond when we do these things and do it properly.
Thank you, Paul. Now we have time for questions and answers. And I don't know if somebody is handing a mic out, but we have this gentleman here.
Yeah, my name is Alex Carlin. I'm reporting for Center for Media and Democracy. I think you guys are doing a wonderful thing, really fantastic. I just want to emphasize one thing. This is beyond emissions reduction, right? When you name, but you're still putting emissions reduction first in your pillars. And I want to go quite a bit further on that. I want to say that, yeah, 45 years ago, I would agree with you. But at this point, if you did nothing about emissions reduction, or for that matter, had a magic wand and had all emissions reduction, it still wouldn't affect the actual situation. So you've gone, because we currently have enough CO2 in the atmosphere to do all this damage. Too hot to work, too hot for farms to produce food, too much acid in the water for fish to exist. So we're already there. The first priority should be taking it out by far. I mean, you could just ignore the emissions reduction because for example, ocean pasture restoration, OPR, Google it, and that Mount Pinatubo showed that by 2050, we would be back to a normal concentration of greenhouse gas. We'd be back to 280 by 250. We know we can do that, and we can control that. If you want to sit around and wait for emissions reduction, then even if we get it, it doesn't do us any good, really.
Okay.
So I want to encourage you guys to put the first pillar, take it out of the atmosphere, and then emissions reduction later in your priority. That's my only.
Okay.
But otherwise, I love everything you guys are doing and fully support it.
Okay, so Alex, thank you for your provocation. Now, I personally have a slightly different stance on that, and the reason being is that if we continue to make the problem worse, then that's a terrible, terrible thing. So
it's 1% per year is all you're adding. 1%.
Let me finish. And actually, Paul was actually, I thought, rather beautifully described it as a three-legged stool. Sure. So much as though I started with emissions reduction, actually, I don't think Paul decided which leg came first. But it is absolutely critical absolutely critical that we throw a lot of effort at emissions reduction, as well as the solar radiation management research. But at the moment, Alex, we are not in a position to be able to propose or say that solar radiation management is not going to work. We don't have enough knowledge base. So actually, I really feel very strongly that emissions reduction has to be basically part of the solution. Thank
That's
you.
what 99% of the people are doing.
Can we go to the next question, please?
Your role
Heidi.
would be a different role.
Could we, excuse me, we have other people who have questions. We appreciate your passion.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and good to see you guys again. My name is Heidi Silvestre. I'm a glaciologist and deputy secretary at AMAP, the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program. And we've met many times at different COPs, and you know I don't agree with the extreme parts of geoengineering that can have extremely negative consequences on ecosystems. And I would like to highlight, I don't know if you've had time to read it, we've actually just released the preprint of a paper with 40 different scientists, many of them are in the room today, entitled Safeguarding the Polar Regions from Dangerous Geoengineering. And I think it's time that the scientific community came together to highlight the potential danger of geoengineering. As you know, my question to you is, speaking of solar radiation management, could you tell us more about the implications that this could have on not only Arctic ecosystems, but if it spreads out to other places, what could be the consequences on the rest of the world besides potentially cooling temperatures? Thank you very much.
So I will answer that. The purpose of the research, all right, is to address this very point, because I completely agree that the solar radiation management practices could be dangerous. But actually, they could also be not dangerous and actually a force for good for the planet when you do a risk-risk analysis. And in fact, at the moment, we don't have enough knowledge base to be able to steer one way or the other. We just don't. And therefore, what I'm keen to do is to be able to enable society to make a more balanced and informed view about the relative risks. And it is a relative risk sort of argument that we need to consider. And I don't have that knowledge base. I don't know anyone that does right now to be able to be very strong. And I have read the preprint, right? But I don't think that's the only sort of set of opinions or set of analyses, right? And in fact, I would say, after reading that preprint, I would say there's an even greater call for research because of the paucity of knowledge that we've got in this space. We really need to do more work in order to be able to arrive at a position where we think about the relative risks. Thank you.
Any of the other panelists want to comment?
Just one point to remember, we're in a dangerous world right now. You know, we've done inadvertent geoengineering with all our fossil fuel emissions that are in the atmosphere. The International Maritime Organization just cut sulfur out of shipping fuels, and we're seeing tremendous warming over the ocean in those regions. So this is already going on. That solar radiation management through aerosols in the atmosphere, it's already happening.
So I would just like to add that last year, I was rather surprised, but Extinction Rebellion, the founders thereof, the three of them wrote a blog post. And it was quite revealing. The first thing that they did was to apologize by saying that they got some things wrong, which I thought was very disarming and incredibly clever in terms of framing. But the two big points that really struck me were, the first was that as a result of what Paul's just identified regarding the change in the IMO regulations, what they asked for was a review, not a cessation of the regulations, but a review of the implications of those changes because of the impact on the ocean. That was the first thing. And then the second thing that they asked for and called for were outdoor experiments on marine cloud brightening. Now, that isn't, I don't think, because they think that's the answer. All right? I really think they are aware that we're in a horrible place. And in fact, if this can be shown to work and the risks, I would say, at least bounded or framed, then that's something society should consider. But we don't have that knowledge base right now. So for the call for research from an organization or the founders of the organization, Extinction Rebellion, I thought was quite revealing in terms of just the depth that we are currently in and the depth, the paucity of knowledge that we have in this space and needing that to be filled. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? If not, then I'd like to thank everyone, thank our amazing panelists. This is a subject that requires much more time. I think what's so amazing about COP, you heard those two questions from two completely different perspectives, And if in the course of these next 10 days or so, those of you who have these different perspectives can share coffee, have a Danish, and try to resolve our differences, because there's no more important set of conversations on the planet than what is occurring right here in this community at this time. So with that, again, we thank you very much, and we look forward to doing more of these programs on behalf of the Climate Emergency Forum. Thanks again.